Hello everyone, how you doing? You're very welcome to this week's Last Word in Formula One with myself, Aidan Raftery, and of course, as always, the last word in Formula One, literally, or from around Ireland, is the one and only Michael O'Grady. Hello, Michael. How are you? Are you well?
I'm not too bad at all, although I will apologise for the lighting this evening. We will try and get that better next week.
Don't worry, folks. He's trying to get that Bohemian Rhapsody type look, from that video from years ago.
That's it. It's kind of Bohemian Rhapsody crossed with better.
So
That's an
yeah,
interesting.
so this week so it's we're decided on that it's a Bohemian Rhapsody kind of look that you're going for this week.
That's absolutely it. A bit. Look, I can do a bit of that too.
Hey,
Get a bit of.
we're going posh, yeah. See, yeah, for extra lighting. Michael, we're talking about the this year's. We're talking about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and as always, an interesting Grand Prix it is. And I suppose just kind of looking at comparisons, I suppose the just having a look there at the schedule there. It's a very interesting schedule as always. The race is at 12 p.m. on the 30th. Oh, sorry, I'll work from the bottom up. On the 28th, practice one from 10:30 to 11:30. On the 28th, then it's qualifying from 2 o'clock until 3. And
Correct.
29th, then it's sprint shootout from 9:30 till 10:14. And then the sprint then on the 29th from 2:30 till 3 o'clock. And finally the race on the 30th at 12 o'clock. So I suppose just to kick off really, comparing last season to this season, can you see any differences in time, or I suppose there's some new drivers that have improved. There's cars that have improved. There's cars that maybe have disimproved. There's maybe a few drivers that aren't as good as last year. I suppose from a qualifying perspective, and on the day of the Grand Prix itself, what are your thoughts?
To be honest with you, they're going to be closing on the same sort of speed again. Now, remember last year, Charles Leclerc actually got pole position here. I wouldn't hold my breath this year personally, and he did that in a 1:41.3, which is a pretty good lap time. That's obviously going to be, a couple of seconds faster than the race situation, because of course in the race they're carrying loads and loads of fuel, whereas for qualifying they're carrying, well, very little fuel, I suppose. Although in this situation, this year, of course, we're back to sprint qualifying for this particular one. There was a big deal about the teams talking to each other or something like that and agreeing on the sprint. Basically, all they've agreed is, yes, Azerbaijan's a good spot to do sprint qualifying this year. So for the fourth race of the season, it's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out with these cars. Shouldn't be any great shocks, I have to admit. But, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see what happens. Fastest lap last year was a 1:46 from Sergio Perez. Now, Sergio will definitely be looking to try and duplicate that. He'll be looking to try and get ahead of his teammate, to be quite honest with you. We'll have to see exactly what goes on there, as I say. But this is only the fifth time this track has hosted a Formula One Grand Prix. It is that new. And it's a very interesting little track, you'd have to say, with a couple of long straights in it. Actually, I don't know if you have the track in front of you there. It's kind of almost like a key.
It is, I would have said, yeah, like a wrench or something, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it's particularly unusual the way the track actually is, with sort of sector one and part of sector two being almost rectangular.
Yeah. Do you think do you think that will, I suppose, affect the lap times in qualifying and the race on the day as well? Would there be much of a difference between the qualifying and the race itself? Well, lap time.
Yeah, a couple of seconds, I'd say, would be about it. The qualifying should be a couple of seconds faster. Now, sprint qualifying, you see, this time again, we have a different qualifying, and then we're into sprint shootout, now we're into sprint qualifying, and then we're off to the race. Qualifying itself will definitely be the fastest, no doubt whatsoever. Sprint qualifying, I'd say you might be looking at lap times, maybe the fastest lap time about a second slower than qualifying, but race time will be around 2 seconds slower, mainly because they're carrying a whole load of fuel and all this sort of crack. You can't go as fast as you can in a very light car. So I mean that's going to happen. Then even with the sprint, they do X amount of laps, and so you have to have your car full, as they say, and they don't change tires unless something really bad happens.
And how can you see it? I suppose affecting. First of all, I suppose tire choice is going to be essential for this one due to some really weird bends on it. Different types of bends, but also I suppose pit stop changes as well.
Well, that's very true. Now, I've noticed for this year they have brought the C3, C4, and C5 compound have Pirelli brought to the track. Now, again, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. A lot of people get head up about, is it C1, is it C2, is it C3? Don't put any pass. Because normally it's just to suit the track itself. If the track is particularly abrasive, well, then they'll get a soft tire, which will work a little bit better with that. If the track isn't abrasive, well, then they'll use a soft tire that works a little bit better with that.
And so weather-wise as well, it's being the country that it's in. Probably going to be very a very hot day, so it'll be that's another factor for tires as well, and I suppose the traction to the track as well.
Yeah, I have the weather 5cast here somewhere, actually. What's the weather 5cast? Here we are. Azerbaijan. You can take a while stab in the dark that it's going to be mostly sunny. But the funny thing is, Sunday is cloudy. That's going to be interesting. And the temperatures here, actually, the temperatures are higher on the cloudy day, which is kind of a bit unusual, I would have said. Friday, they're looking at a high of 21 degrees. Saturday, they're looking at a high of 24 degrees. And on cloudy Sunday, they're looking at for a high of 25 degrees. That's going to be quite interesting because, of course, we always put down, it's cloudy, it's going to be a bit cooler, cars are going to work better. Not in this situation now, I'd say not. There is a 20% chance of rain on race day. Now, this, we're a few days before race day, and you know what weather forecasts are like. Yeah. So maybe torrential by the time it gets here. There may be no race at all, or no rain at all. It is very hard to say, but either way, it's going to be a very good race. I'd say you're going to look a bit of a repetition on last year, bar the fact Charles Leclerc won't be as close to the front, unless Ferrari have done something startling in the last few weeks. I mean, it's been about 3 weeks, I think, since the last race. Unless they've done something startling, I'm sure they've been tweaking the car. But you see, it's like everything. It's very hard to play catch up because everybody else is tweaking their car too. You're not the only.
Made it into a remote control one that they can control. No need for a driver then.
That could be interesting. Yes, that could be very. I could even do it myself in that case. It would be good, all right. Now, I did notice, just looking at the track here, that the DRS activation point was moved a bit further ahead. It's a good bit ahead, I would have said. It's after turn 20 there, which is. I'm not quite sure what the distance is on it, but it's definitely been moved forwards to where it was last year. So that's a bit of an interesting situation, I have to admit. With the guys coming down straight into the main straight, the speed trap there, and then heading around through their little rectangle and off to the next one again. So it's interesting. I don't know why they changed it. It seems very peculiar. Having it closer to the DRS point with or to the DRS zone, I should say, with half a straight in front, by the time you get there. Maybe they're hoping that, if you're right behind the guy rather than closer to the corner, maybe it's going to be a bit harder and a bit more real for someone to be behind him. I'm not quite sure what the thinking is on that. Obviously, they know a little bit more than we do. They wouldn't know as much as Paul Egan knows, but they know more than we do.
Yeah, well, that's it. He is the... He is another last word on Formula One as well, and I suppose I suppose in this one as well with regards to the good old safety car. And
Yes.
where on the track do you think it can be won and lost?
Safety car. We don't want to see a safety car. Okay, that's the first thing we want to say before we do anything else. We don't want to see a safety car. Now, winning and losing on this, it's kind of a strange circle. It's kind of a rectangle this side, and then actually no, I'm looking. You're looking at me, of course. So it's a rectangle that side,
Yeah.
and a circle almost.
It's like a roundabout, really, isn't it? It's like a massive roundabout on one end, and then a square.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it's really peculiar. Obviously, the two DRS zones are going to be good overtaking points. I would say people will be apprehensive about the first one because the problem is if you overtake someone on the first DRS zone, you've got two very sharp 90-degree bends and you're into the next DRS zone. Now, of course, if you're going to overtake somebody, there's a very good chance he's going to be less than a second behind you by the time you hit the second DRS zone, and we're going to be overtaken. There, he's going to take the place back again. So you might see a bit of caginess there. You might see guys faster but staying in position until they get around the corner as to the next DRS zone. I reckon that's going to be critical. And I'd say then turn 3 is going to be a place of great overtaking, except when it comes to Fernando Alonso, he could overtake anywhere.
Yeah. And I suppose really looking at it as well, with regards to the various drivers, they have different styles and that. Like I was saying on previous interviews, looking at this track, who's the most like aside from Verstappen, he'd probably ace it. But we say aside from him, who do you think, with regards to their driving style, is most likely to suit?
Well, other than the Red Bulls, because the car is just so fast, nobody can catch up with it, really. I'd have said Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc are going to do very well here if their cars can keep going. Because we have had trouble, especially with Charles Leclerc. There has been a lot of issues with the car and bits and pieces. We'll talk about that in a second, actually, a couple of things on that in a second when we're talking about the news. But I would be expecting Fernando Alonso to get another podium. It's kind of, he's got X amount in a row. And, maybe it's an easy prediction to say he's going to get another one, but it actually isn't because, eventually the luck is going to run out, if it's luck, which I don't think it is. I think he's practically best of the rest at this stage. I do think Ferrari is faster, but they just can't seem to get it together. Poor call still this year. Issues with the car again this year. Charles Leclerc finishing one race in 3. It's just a disaster. You think after all,
it's a ironic thing to say, but it's and they finishing 1 out of 3. It is progress as opposed to as opposed to not finishing 3 out of 3. So I suppose at least that can be a starting point for the first time this season.
Yeah, but you look at it last year now, and there was a massive difference. They were so close in the first few races; it was unreal. They were kind of fighting against each other. I'm ahead. No, you're ahead. No, I'm ahead. No, you're ahead. And now it's kind of, two did not finishes, and one, we did okay, but we could have done a lot better. I don't know what's going on with Ferrari, and I'm a big Ferrari fan myself, but
I have by the baseball cap.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely it. Actually, it was a conundrum when Aston Martin come in because I have to admit, Aston Martin is my favourite supercar.
I noticed as well you changed your name to Zoom User. Is that like a Japanese kind of name? Is that a new Japanese name you've come up with?
Well, I'm so technical with having the clue. I didn't even know it changed. I'm going to have to look into that.
I'm only joking.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. But
it's wrong not to pick up on that,
Yeah, but that long main straight, you see, it's going to be a funny one because
it'd be ideal for a drag race, wouldn't it?
Well, it'd be great for a drag race, and it's great. Bar actual DRS zone number 2, a very short hop away from it, so it is kind of. It's almost robbing us of racing in a certain way because, you can have a better car, you can have DRS. It's a long straight, so, you can get by. But can you get by and keep more than a second ahead? That's the real issue, and I think that's actually going to make people back off maybe a little bit on the main straight when they're trying to overtake someone. Not in the race itself; they'll be going hell bent for leather. But I think when they're trying to overtake someone, there's going to be a kind of a yeah, I'm not going to take him yet sort of situation. I'll get him in the next straight because the next DRS zone isn't actually that short. It's reasonably good. So we wait and see. The only person I'd say would probably not care and take a stab on the first DRS zone is probably Fernando Alonso, because just the guy's alone to himself, which is a great thing to see these days.
You gotta like that. You gotta like that about a driver, and they're alone to themselves.
Yeah, he just does what he needs to do. He's very happy camper this year. There's no complaining from him. There's no issues. Something goes wrong, he's just passed water off a duck's back. He's a happy camper this year. And I still think he's one of the best drivers out there. I don't care what anyone says. I would love to actually see Fernando Alonso in a Red Bull against Max Verstappen. Max will win, but not by much. I'd say Alonso will be on top of him for the vast majority of the race. I'd love to see that happening. But I'm still tipping him for third place, unless Perez does something really silly. Now, of course, the other spanner in the works, Ferrari to a certain extent, but I don't know if they're going to make it or not this weekend. I think the real spanner in the works at the moment is George Russell. I think he is currently, this year and last year, the best driver Mercedes have. Like it, lump it, be a fan of one thing, be a fan of the other. He's very consistent. And normally, there's been several situations where he has been treated unfairly. They have said, oh, well, you do this and you do that and you do the other. Or, as recently, if Lewis had held on in there and stopped attacking him, they could have finished better in the last race, So it's kind of, I think George Russell is definitely a spanner in the works. That guy's a world champion in the making, I think. He's an absolutely amazing driver, that guy. Maybe he'll win with Mercedes, or maybe he'll go somewhere else. Who knows?
The world is his oyster. And I suppose that's the age-old rivalry between Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton.
Yes.
Where's Lewis going to stay? Where's Lewis going to finish, do you reckon?
I don't know. I could see him finishing further down than third, because I still think the two Red Bulls are way out there, and I think Aston Martin are faster than anybody thought they were going to be. Now, that's not to say, I'm surprised actually with the accusation of I don't know how Red Bull have got so fast this year. I'm surprised that hasn't been said about Aston Martin yet. But I
suppose the budget has a lot to do with that, and I suppose that gives them greater access to better parts and different things like that. And
well, I suppose Aston Martin are a bit like Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull are kind of, we have the drink, but there's so many other Red Bull to do rallying, the motor racing, to beat the band. It's not just Formula One, they're all over the place. And of course, Aston Martin is owned by ProDrive, which is a racing company. That's what it started out being, was a racing company. And they still are racing. You'll see cars from them in the Paris-Dakar Rally and things like that, So, I mean, it seems like the racing teams are pulling something out of the bag rather than the actual car manufacturers, I suppose, because we all know Mercedes is a car company, Ferrari is a car company, so it's kind of almost...
But there's that difference between a car company and a racing car company.
Well, I suppose to a certain extent. the only ever got that exactly right was Ferrari, because they were bought out. Fiat were bought out. Alfa Romeo were bought out. All that sort of crack. But the Ferrari F1 team is still a separate entity. So they're kind of, we're a racing team. They're handled differently. Even when Fiat bought Ferrari out originally, back in the day when Ferrari played a very clever game between Ford and Fiat. Even when they were brought out, there was kind of an agreement made that the Formula One racing team is separate. It is a different entity. It's a different animal altogether. They're just not interested in... I mean, the production cars are one thing. The team is totally different, where sort of Mercedes F1 and, the car company are kind of the same thing. Yeah, there's a slightly different, there's a different place to work and it's a different type of car. But Ferrari F1 really is totally separate than Ferrari cars altogether. You know, it has, yeah, they use all the same information, but it's a totally different organization. You know, so that's a racing team too. Hence, Ferrari are what the most successful Formula One team of all time. Although they could use a bit of a kick at the minute, couldn't they?
Well, that's it. That's it. And of course, I suppose when you have a driver like Max Verstappen doing well, it's key. You know, Red Bull and the car he has, and what we all know what that car is well able to do on the racetrack. You know,
well, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, they're absolutely amazing, and I mean the way Red Bull handle it. I think the only concern for Red Bull is if Adrian Newey ever retires. You know, he's the chief engineer and he's been around since the Schumacher era, and the man's incredible. And it would be a worry of theirs, I would say, if one day he turns around and says, "I'm retiring." As good as the rest of the team is, sometimes one individual can make a difference. And I think with Red Bull, yeah, if Adrian Newey hits 90, we still want a one person.
Yeah. So we say if you were a mechanic, we say with Mercedes, and you were to compare it to you know, obviously Red Bull, the car that they have, in order to get kind of anywhere near that speed or the brilliance of that car.
Yeah.
What are the tweaks, I should say, of that might need to be made to the car in general? Is it parts? Is it fuel? Is it the shape of the car? How long is a piece of string? I suppose. What do you do?
Exactly. It's everything. It's minute little changes make a massive difference to these cars, and that's kind of what's happening really. Mercedes thought they were very clever last year and it didn't work out for them, and they're kind of pushing with other things that they started last year, but now other teams have adopted them as well. So kind of, you know, the benefits that we're getting from them are suddenly, you know, not the same anymore because, you know, other people are using it as well. So it's the tiny little changes you can make to that car will make a difference. But of course, you see, it has to suit the driver too. It's, you know, if you have a car that's bad on his tires, when you put Jenson Button in there because the guy's was as smooth as silk, and he's going to use the tires less than anybody else. You know, he was very good at it. So it really depends on the driver as well. I mean, you know yourself, Max Verstappen is going to go hell bent for leather, and you know, God help the tires.
Yeah, like in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix as well. That's going to be the pit stops are going to be, or the tire changes is going to be essential as well. Be given the track as well.
Yeah, it's not as clear cut as some of them. It's going to be a 2-stop race. Yeah. It's not like last race nearly 4 weeks ago. Actually, I keep thinking it's 3 weeks ago. Where like you could change once and nearly run to the end of the race. You know. Matter of fact, a few of them pitted very early and changed over to hard tires to try and make it to the end of the race. So, I mean, that's an interesting little situation in itself. This one's going to be pretty much status quo. I think everybody's going to do exactly the same thing, which is good for Max Verstappen. Not good for anyone who's trying to pass him.
That's it. So, I suppose, given your top five, then, as how you reckon they're going to finish, and compare it to last season, how they finished last season. I think you might have mentioned it earlier on in the interview.
Yeah. Well, top five, we're going to put Max first. I think the car is just unstoppable. Unless something, you know, let's take out the fact of crashes or breakdowns or safety cars or anything like that. Yeah, Max is going to win it. And I'd be very surprised if Checo wasn't second. He's been very good. And even though he's fallen back in quite a lot of races, he's pushed himself forwards. And I would see Fernando Alonso getting third. I mean, remember the last race where, you know, Lewis Hamilton was ahead of him, and he actually mentioned, you know, that Aston Martin is quick. You know, for someone like that to be noticing the Aston Martin is quick and Fernando Alonso happens to be driving it, it's a fast car. After that, I'm going to put in George Russell and maybe a Ferrari, maybe Sainz, maybe Leclerc. Leclerc needs it badly. Let's face it, he needs it badly. But I don't think Ferrari have the car right just yet. I think they're going to be they could easily drop the third in the constructors this year, which would be a bit of a disaster considering, they did a little bit better last year. So it would be a little bit better. But of course, the key thing as well, as something we don't know, it's nearly 4 weeks. How have they developed the cars between the last race and this race? They could be completely different. They could have tweaked something, changed something, aerodynamically, or perhaps got the car with a bit more downforce or whatever. So that's going to be a very interesting little situation. And another situation that's looming as well. You remember Carlos Sainz there in the last race got his big, massive penalty on the restart, and there has been complaining and waggling of fingers and arguing and things like that. That's actually not been settled yet. There's a lot of toing and froing, so we're waiting to see what happens on that, because of course that's going to make a big impact.
I think you're representing them, aren't you, in the legal proceedings?
I can neither confirm nor deny representing half the drivers on the track.
How can you say you're not a judge, or you're not a
I'm not a judge or a jury? As Bernie was saying, I wasn't supposed to talk about Bernie's chat last week. He told me not to say anything. But anyway,
you don't want to incriminate anyone.
No, don't want to incriminate anyone. No. We're going to be nice to everybody this week.
Well, you have to be. Like, we're like that on Rosfm, And
we are.
So I suppose we're looking at the standings as well, just before we move on.
Yeah, the standings, yes. Well, I think we know who's first. I could be wrong here, but I think we know.
That's a dark sort of situation, isn't it? Really, like.
Yeah, it is. It is really. Max is first and Sergio is second. That's going to remain that way for the rest of the year. I can't see that changing at all. Fernando Alonso's in a nice third place. Not massively comfortable, but I mean, Lewis Hamilton is actually behind him, 38 points, and Alonso's 45. Now, the fact that Lewis Hamilton is behind him and could overtake him will give Fernando Alonso an extra 10 kilometers per hour on race day.
Yeah.
The two of them are best buddies, and quite good best buddies.
Quite like himself and Verstappen, they're best buddies as well,
Oh, absolutely. And then we have Sainz and Stroll and Russell. Now, Russell is seventh. He doesn't deserve to be seventh. He's doing a lot better. He's just had a rough time, really. I mean, the last race was just incredible how, Lewis attacked him. He's supposed to be keeping the car behind the two years, not in front of the 2 years, and it did actually cause issues and caused him issues and caused him to fall down in the race. So let's hope that no city buggers that way this week. Then you go down to 8th, Lando Norris, 9th, Nico Hulkenberg, and in a lowly 10th place, Charles Leclerc. Imagine what that would. You wouldn't have guessed that from last year now, in fairness, would you? But I mean, he got 6 points in one race. That's all he's got. He didn't finish the other two. So I'm sure Ferrari are hoping that'll improve.
Was that a strategic thing, was it, not finishing the other two?
Absolutely. It's all everyone into a false sense of security. That's what they're at the moment.
That's my line. That's my line.
And that yourself, Now, let's not forget, it was a 1-2 last year in Baku for Red Bull, even though Charles Leclerc was in pole position. So I'm expecting not to see anything different this year, other than maybe the further down than it was the last time. I'm willing them on. I am on. I'm there, watching. Go faster, go faster.
And on to the news now. Any other little bits of interesting news, as you always have?
There's always loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of news. Fernando Alonso is very excited, it seems, to see what the tweaks to the Alfa Romeo is going to do in sprint qualifying. And he, of course, wants to keep his podium streak going well. Now, that does say to me that Aston Martin weren't sitting around on their hands while everyone was away on holidays. They've been doing something. So he's looking forward to driving the car in anger. To be honest with you, probably the sprint qualifying suits these guys, because there has been tweaks, and now they're actually going to be at a race in a race situation without it actually being the race. So, I mean, if you dropped a couple of places because you weren't used to the car, not the end of the world, so I'm sure that's going to be good. Now, another interesting one that I was reading, Fernando Alonso has said Aston Martin must adopt a humble approach this year, despite the fact that he's had three great finishes. You know, it's absolutely incredible. He's kind of knocking it backwards almost a wee bit. You know, he says here we need to learn and grow off track. What exactly that means, I don't know. To me, that sounds like somebody managing expectations. I've never known Fernando Alonso to expect anything but to win. You know,
well, that's it. So well, I mean, if you don't expect to win, there's no point in going out on the track.
Well, that's very true. Yes, there's no point in being out there at all. You need to think you're going to win, even if you're paddy last. You need to think you're going to win. You know, so it's an interesting situation as to what's going on there. Maybe he's trying to calm the team down because, you know, it could be like Ferrari. We all get overly excited and then disaster strikes. You know, so maybe that's what he's at. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It is an unusual one. Yuki Tsunoda says he's feeling stronger this weekend and in 2023 in general. He has key areas which he is looking to improve on in 2023. What exactly that means as well, I'm sure we could look into this and you know, dissect it like a psychiatrist. But look, I'm just putting that into, you know, I need to improve, and I'm telling you I'm going to. Not quite sure what that statement is all about. We'll go with it. We won't argue too much, you know. There was an interesting comment as well with Christian Horner when he was talking about Max Verstappen, and I've just got it up here. And it's a weird one because I think it's more what's going to happen to Max next, because Christian Horner has made a comment. I don't see him being a Fernando Alonso. Now, as we know, Fernando got us a couple of world championships and then everything went haywire and fell apart. Not for his fault. You know, Renault were backing out and he was put in teams and it didn't work out. And himself and Lewis had a lovely friendship for a little while. That really helped along the way. And he had to leave in order to get his head together. He doesn't see that happening with Max. I couldn't see that happening with Max either. He's a different animal altogether. Fernando is very passionate. You know, the man should be Italian. He's so passionate and he's so into it. You know what I mean? He's focused. Now, Max is focused too, but really Max is focused when he's in the car, and when he's out of the car, he doesn't really care. You know, try and get a comment out of him is quite difficult. You know, how you well, you know yourself, we'll do our best. You know, he puts stuff past. So I'm not quite sure what that comment is about. Again, there's been a few oddball comments I have to admit out this week, and I'm not sure that's going to do anything. I'm not sure exactly what he's trying to achieve with that statement. But look, he said it anyhow, so it's out there anyhow. And it does say here, I'm just looking at an article that I haven't seen yet, and it said Aston Martin's much improved form has led to a more enjoyable but more challenging race weekends for the team. I'm sure that happens to teams. I mean, you know, when you're in the middle of the ground, and then suddenly, it doesn't matter what sport you're in, suddenly you're thrust right up, you know, front and center, and you're making a reasonable jump. They're not making a massive jump. They're making a reasonable jump. I mean, they did okay last year. You know, making a reasonable jump. I'm sure it's a lot more pressure on the team to perform. I'm sure there's a lot more expectations to perform. And I'm sure even all the way back to the engineers back, you know, in the UK, I'm sure there's an awful lot more pressure on them. You know, you need to tweak stats. We're fast now. We're right up there. We need to be a little bit quicker. So, yeah, that doesn't really, you know, kind of surprise me that much. It's how the team are going to deal with it is the issue. I don't see Fernando Alonso having a problem dealing with it. Fernando's he's well used to being at the front. You know, I mean, he was there the heady days of Michael Schumacher, and, you know, Schumacher not changing his tires made him lose his last, you know, season with Ferrari, made him lose the world championship. But Fernando, you know, he was well used to being up there and winning races and doing his bits and pieces. So I'm not quite sure where they're going with that. I mean, there's a lot of seasoned people in Aston Martin, but yes, it's going to be a wee bit tougher, as to say, you know. Pirelli, are happy with their tyre development as they talk about their plans for the future. Who was surprised at Pirelli being happy about their tyres? I think we should go again, you know. Yeah, at the moment as well, I do feel a bit sorry for. I was just looking at a couple of things during the week. Williams, I'm kind of feeling a bit sorry for them at the minute. I was just looking at articles and conversations and people talking about them and people talking to them. And I think they're getting, I think people are being a little unfair with them at the minute. I think people should, it's not a fair reflection of what's going on at the minute with Williams. They've had a rough time of it. I mean, Frank Williams not being part of the team was disastrous. Yes, they got in Clare, they got in Vowles and all this sort of crack, but they're a team that are trying to push forwards again, and they don't have the money of Aston Martin. They don't have the money of Ferrari or Mercedes or Red Bull. But I have seen a lot about them during the week, and I just wanted to put me speak in and say, give them a break.
Yeah, that's it. It's not an exact science, and these things take time. So listen, thanks very much, Michael, for taking the time out to do last word on Formula One, and we look forward to looking back on the Azerbaijan Grand Prix next week.
Next week we will indeed. Let's hope there's a few surprises.
Let's hope so. And okay, so thanks very much. Bye.
See you then.